What if I told you that procrastination isn't a character flaw? What if the reason you keep putting things off has nothing to do with laziness or lack of discipline? After studying behavioral psychology and interviewing people who transformed from chronic procrastinators into productivity machines, I discovered something that will change everything. Procrastination isn't about poor time management or weak willpower. It's about emotional regulation. And there are 5 specific habits that address the root causes of procrastination and make taking action feel natural instead of painful. Here's the scientific truth that nobody tells you. Procrastination is an emotional coping mechanism. When you procrastinate, you're not avoiding the task itself, you're avoiding the negative emotions that task triggers. Anxiety about failing, fear of judgment, overwhelm from complexity, boredom from tedium. Your brain chooses short-term emotional relief through avoidance over long-term benefit through action. Think about the last time you procrastinated. You knew you should do the task. You had time. You had the skills. But you found yourself doing literally anything else. Scrolling social media, cleaning your desk, making another coffee. That's not laziness. That's your brain seeking emotional comfort by avoiding the discomfort associated with the task. I used to be a world-class procrastinator. Important deadlines would loom while I'd waste hours on trivial activities. I'd feel terrible about myself while simultaneously being unable to start. I tried every productivity technique. Nothing worked because I was addressing the wrong problem. I was trying to manage my time when I needed to manage my emotions. Then I discovered these 5 habits used by people who had completely conquered procrastination, not through superhuman discipline, but by understanding and addressing the emotional root causes. When I implemented these habits, procrastination simply disappeared. Tasks I used to avoid became easy to start. Projects I used to dread became manageable. The change wasn't that I became more disciplined. The change was that I removed the emotional barriers that made starting difficult. The beautiful thing about these 5 habits is they work at the psychological level. They don't just help you push through procrastination, they eliminate the conditions that cause it. You're not fighting yourself anymore because you've removed the internal conflict that procrastination represents. But here's what most people get wrong about beating procrastination. They try to use willpower to force themselves to do things they're emotionally resisting. This creates an internal war that's exhausting and ultimately fails. These 5 habits work differently. They address why you're resisting in the first place, making action feel natural rather than forced. Some of these habits involve reframing how you think about tasks. Others involve breaking the emotional association between tasks and negative feelings. Some create momentum that carries you forward. Together, they form a complete system that destroys procrastination at its source. The research is clear. Procrastination isn't about time management, it's about emotion management. These 5 habits give you the tools to manage the emotions that trigger avoidance, making consistent action effortless instead of agonizing. If you're tired of procrastinating, tired of disappointing yourself, tired of knowing what you should do but being unable to start, subscribe right now because these 5 habits will free you from procrastination forever. Habit 1. The 2-minute start rule. The first habit that destroys procrastination is the 2-minute start rule. Instead of committing to completing a task, commit to working on it for just 2 minutes. Not finishing, just starting. This eliminates the emotional resistance that comes from thinking about the entire overwhelming task. Your brain resists committing to a 3-hour project. It doesn't resist 2 minutes. Once you start, you'll almost always continue beyond 2 minutes because starting is the hardest part. The procrastination comes from anticipating the task, not from actually doing it. This works because it removes the emotional weight. You're not asking yourself to write an entire report. You're asking yourself to write for 2 minutes. You're not committing to a full workout, just 2 minutes of movement. The commitment is so small that emotional resistance disappears. Jennifer procrastinated on writing for years. Every time she sat down, the thought of completing an article paralyzed her. When she implemented the 2-minute start rule, everything changed. She'd commit to writing for just 2 minutes. Almost always, she'd continue for much longer because starting was the only hard part. Within 6 months, she'd written more than in the previous 5 years. The key is genuine permission to stop after 2 minutes. You're not tricking yourself, you're genuinely lowering the barrier to starting. Most of the time, you'll continue, but even on days you stop after 2 minutes, you've made progress instead of avoiding completely. Habit 2. the emotion labeling practice. The second habit addresses procrastination at its emotional root. Before starting a task you're avoiding, pause and specifically label the emotion you're feeling about it. I'm feeling anxious about being judged. I'm feeling overwhelmed by the complexity. I'm feeling bored by the tedium. This simple act of labeling reduces the emotion's power. Research shows that naming emotions activates your prefrontal cortex and reduces amygdala activity, literally calming your emotional brain. You're no longer being controlled by unnamed discomfort, you're consciously acknowledging specific feelings. Once you've labeled the emotion, you can address it directly. If you're anxious about judgment, remind yourself that imperfect action beats perfect inaction. If you're overwhelmed, break the task into smaller steps. If you're bored, find ways to make it more engaging. The emotion becomes manageable once it's identified. Marcus avoided difficult work conversations for weeks. When he started labeling his emotions, he realized he was feeling fear of conflict. Once named, he could address it. This conversation might be uncomfortable, but avoiding it makes everything worse. The labeled emotion lost its power to drive procrastination. Habit 3. The implementation intention protocol. The third habit eliminates the decision-making that triggers procrastination by creating specific implementation intentions. Instead of vague goals like, I'll work on the project, create specific if-then plans. When I finish my morning coffee at 9 a.m., I will immediately open my laptop and work on the project introduction. Procrastination thrives on ambiguity. When exactly will you start? What specifically will you do? How long will you work? Each of these questions requires a decision, and decisions create opportunities for emotional resistance. Implementation intentions eliminate all those decision points. Research shows that people who create implementation intentions are 2 to 3 times more likely to follow through compared to those with vague intentions. You're pre-deciding when, where, and exactly what you'll do, removing the mental friction that enables procrastination. Sarah struggled to exercise consistently because she'd wake up and decide in the moment whether to work out. That daily decision invited procrastination. When she created an implementation intention, when my alarm rings at 6 a.m., I immediately put on my workout clothes and do the 20-minute routine in my living room. Exercise became automatic. The decision was already made, eliminating the opportunity to procrastinate. The key is extreme specificity. Not, I'll work on the project tomorrow, but tomorrow at 10 a.m., immediately after my team meeting, I will go to the conference room and work on the project budget spreadsheet for 90 minutes. Specificity eliminates the decision-making that procrastination exploits. Habit 4. The progress over perfection. Mindset. The fourth habit tackles one of the biggest procrastination triggers, perfectionism. Many people procrastinate because they're paralyzed by the need to do things perfectly. They don't start because they can't envision the perfect outcome, or they avoid continuing because their current progress isn't meeting impossible standards. The antidote is adopting a progress over perfection mindset through a daily practice. At the end of each day, acknowledge progress made rather than focusing on what's incomplete or imperfect. Today I wrote 300 words instead of I didn't finish the article. This retrains your brain to value action over outcomes. Perfectionism triggers procrastination because it makes starting feel dangerous. If you're not sure you can do it perfectly, your brain suggests avoiding it entirely to protect you from potential failure. When you value progress over perfection, starting becomes safe because any action is success. David procrastinated on launching his business for 3 years because his plans weren't perfect. When he shifted to progress over perfection, he started taking imperfect action. Within 6 months, his imperfect business was operating and profitable, while perfect plans would still be sitting in his notebook. Practice this daily. Identify one area where you made any progress, no matter how small. This trains your brain that action is rewarded, which reduces the emotional resistance that causes procrastination. Habit 5. The energy task matching system. The fifth habit eliminates procrastination by matching tasks to your energy levels throughout the day. You procrastinate less when you stop trying to do high-energy tasks during low-energy times. Track your energy patterns for 1 week. When do you feel most alert and focused? When do you experience energy dips? Then, permanently schedule your most important and challenging tasks during peak energy windows and save low-energy tasks like email and administrative work for energy valleys. Most people do the opposite. They waste peak energy on easy tasks, then try to tackle difficult work when exhausted. This guarantees procrastination because your depleted brain will resist challenging tasks during low-energy periods. Lisa discovered her peak energy was 9:11 a.m. She started protecting those hours exclusively for her most important work. Her afternoon slump time became email and routine tasks. Her procrastination on important projects disappeared because she stopped fighting her natural energy rhythms. The transformation these 5 habits create is immediate and lasting. Before implementing them, most chronic procrastinators live in constant guilt. They know what they should do but can't make themselves do it. They waste time on avoidance activities while important tasks loom. They disappoint themselves repeatedly and wonder why they can't just be disciplined. After mastering these habits, procrastination simply stops being an issue. Not because you've developed superhuman discipline, but because you've removed the emotional barriers and structural obstacles that caused procrastination. Tasks don't feel intimidating anymore because you've lowered the barrier to starting. Emotions don't control your actions because you've learned to identify and manage them. Decisions don't create friction because you've pre-made them through implementation intentions. Perfectionism doesn't paralyze you because you value progress. Energy mismatches don't drain you because you've aligned tasks with your natural rhythms. Here's what life without procrastination looks like. You think about doing something and you simply do it. Not through gritted teeth discipline, but because starting feels easy. You tackle important tasks consistently because emotional resistance has been eliminated. You make steady progress on goals because you're taking action daily rather than avoiding weekly. The most powerful shift is internal. You stop seeing yourself as a procrastinator. That identity, which was probably causing shame and self-judgment, dissolves. You become someone who takes action, not because you're inherently disciplined, but because you've built habits that make action natural. But here's the critical truth. These habits require conscious practice initially. Your brain has years of procrastination patterns to overcome. The first week using the 2-minute start rule will feel awkward. Labeling emotions will seem strange. Creating implementation intentions takes effort. But within 2 weeks, these practices become automatic. Within a month, they're just how you operate. The beauty is that each habit reinforces the others. The 2-minute start rule builds momentum that makes labeling emotions easier. Implementation intentions reduce decision fatigue that would otherwise trigger procrastination. Progress over perfection reduces the fear that drives avoidance. Energy task matching ensures you're not fighting your biology. They work together as a complete anti-procrastination system. Start with the 2-minute start rule today. Right now, identify one task you've been avoiding. Commit to working on it for just 2 minutes. Not completing it, just starting. Notice how starting eliminates most of the resistance. Use that insight to build the other habits. Write in the comments one task you've been procrastinating on and which habit you'll use to address it. Be specific. If this video revealed the truth about procrastination, hit that like button and subscribe for more productivity strategies. Share this with someone who struggles with procrastination. These 5 habits aren't about forcing yourself to work harder. They're about removing the emotional and structural barriers that make starting difficult. When you eliminate what causes procrastination, action becomes natural. Your transformation from chronic procrastinator to consistent action taker starts with the first 2-minute commitment you make today.